West on the Sean Doherty Show.
You're very welcome back to the programme now. The government's seeking to discover if it will need to financially assist analogue television households for the digital switchover in late 2012. There was a big Oireachtas joint committee conversation on this. We learned some details, and one of them being that many people will have to have a satellite dish, and Donegal is one of those areas. John Kennedy's editor with SiliconRepublic.com. Hi, John.
Hi, how are you?
First question, why are we doing this? Anyone who can't get telly at this stage generally has some sort of a satellite setup. Are we not just wasting taxpayers' money here?
It's a very good question, actually. The situation is across the world, most countries are switching off their analogue signals or the frequency range to allow them to basically use that frequency for other things. They call that the digital dividend. And that means that frequency that used to be used to transmit your television could be used for things like broadband and other emergency services, for example. Now, this has already happened in the States, for example. It's beginning to happen in the UK. Like in Wales, for example, they've already switched off their analogue signal, and that has already affected people in the southeast of Ireland who would be relying on things like BBC, ITV, all those channels are now no longer there. But the question you do have to ask yourself, I mean, as you say, this will affect Northern Ireland in 2012, and when they switch off their analogue, people who live in Donegal, for example, or in Sligo, or in the border regions, will find that suddenly they're basically going to be without BBC and all those.
Yeah, if your aerial's pointed towards Northern Ireland, you're banjaxed effectively, yeah, and the signal often's not strong enough that even if you were cute enough to go up to Derry maybe and get a free sat box, it's probably no good to you.
Well, I kind of remember, because I remember holidaying a lot in Donegal as a kid, and remember not being able to get many TV channels anyway. But the thing is, most people, if you look at the market, 55 to 60% of the country are already using something like Sky or UBC,
cable or some other. Yeah.
Of course, not in Northern Ireland, but certainly people in Northern Ireland in Donegal are using satellite TV, and that kind of provides for everything. So people who are already using satellite, none of this will matter a lot.
And do you know what? I don't know really if they're getting this right. I probably shouldn't be expressing my point of view or whatever. But anyway, people may have this idea that they get one of these boxes and they'll get all the channels that they have now.
No.
They won't. They'll get RT1, RT2, 3E, perhaps some limited news service and a couple of kids channels. That's it, isn't it?
They'll get out between 7 and 12 new channels.
That's including radio.
Including radio, and the difference is in if you use something like Sky satellite service, for example. I mean, you've got 400 or 500 channels at your disposal, so it's a different thing altogether. But the thing is here, they're using the terrestrial signal as opposed to satellite. Now, where satellite does come into it, terrestrial, which is using your aerials, or the new type of aerials which sit on top of your television set, will reach 90% of the country. The satellite, the other 10%, they envision probably won't rely on this at all, and probably won't be bothered. But 2% of the country will need satellite.
And is the rule of thumb on this, John, effectively, if you're getting a quality signal via a rooftop aerial in the Republic, then the chances are you will be able to get the terrestrial digital service. Would that be it in a nutshell?
No, it'll run an entirely different frequency, like your aerial.
Oh, well, I'm kind of talking about the transmission sites more than anything.
Well, what will happen basically is where you once upon had these big metal aerials on your roof, what you'll have is this little circular thing that will just sit on top of your TV set, or it will be discreetly tucked away, and that will use the frequency in the air to get this signal. So it's a very different thing. It's basically as fundamental as analog to digital. So what it will enable the TV show or the TV station to do is pump more information to your TV set, for example, and allow you to maybe live record stuff.
So I'm just trying to identify then, in terms of those, Donegal's been highlighted as one of the areas where there will be people that won't be able to receive the service through without a satellite. So what's determining that? Is it not geographical in terms of mountainous conditions? Or
I would say primarily that, you know what I mean? I mean, as it stands, the mountainous nature of Donegal means that people who are relying on aerials are finding that their signals are being bounced all over the place, and sometimes if they're relying on terrestrial signals to get their signals, that they're not getting the best signals now. But if you switch to satellite, you're trying into a different ballgame, because you're just pointing up at satellites up in the sky, and nothing's really in the way of that. So I think most people, as I said, you asked a very interesting question. Are we kind of wasting money here? And when you talk about 70 million being spent on digital services that be free to air, like the fundamental difference is free to air means that you can just turn on your TV set and you're entitled as long as you pay your TV license to basically these services. If you go with Sky or UBC or somebody, you're paying a subscription. But the fact of the matter is, close to 60% of the country are already using those services anyway, so they're probably not going to notice it. And most people probably in Donegal who are already using satellite like Sky, most of this argument doesn't mean anything to them. But the question you really have to ask yourself is, will this affect people who have relied on a TV aerial for most of their lives and aren't going to change and are a bit bewildered by all of this? And I think more needs to be done to explain this to people, what it really means.
Yeah, so just for clarification, you're saying then that you won't receive this digital service through a rooftop aerial?
No, you won't. Absolutely not.
Okay, that's interesting. I think too, maybe you made a good point there, John. Maybe we could all get caught up in government bashing here and say 70 million wasted. But you're saying that the analog frequencies are required for other things. So,
absolutely.
This is not just about trying to keep up with the Joneses, i.e., those across the water.
It's a very real international thing that's happening. Like at the moment, for example, most of us have mobile phones. And most of us are finding that the latest mobile phones are capable of doing things like downloading video and doing Skype calls with your cousin in Australia, for example. All of this can happen. It's the wonder of our age. But the fact of the matter is, these applications, for example, are going to get more and more data intensive. We will need what was the signal range that was taken up by TV to be able to allow mobile operators to provide higher speed broadband to anybody, anywhere, if you know what I mean. And that will mean we will need to switch off analog, otherwise we will be left behind internationally.
You can go and pick a set-top box up if you like. If you wanted to go to Spain, you can get them for 20 quid over there, but it's going to be a different situation with satellite. Do you think the government needs to assist those who have to do it via satellite, subsidise it to some extent?
Well, I think it would be a fair point, because, like as I said, there's a lot of people now, particularly elderly people, for example, who have been paying their TV licenses over their lifetime, and they're bewildered, from a point of view, what this actually means, what's the difference between analog and digital in the first place, why it really should concern them. But we're also in one of the biggest recessions we've ever experienced. People the ability to turn on a TV and be able to find out what's going on in the news, or be in touch with other people, or be in touch with the world, should be considered a kind of human right. So I think to be able to, if it's a pensioner, for example, or somebody who's relying on social welfare, they should not be left behind in this.
I just wonder, when this comes in, John, will people be saying, sure, this is a load of crap? The government's restricted its bandwidth on this, haven't they? They've reduced the amount of channels via RTE, of course. No pay TV services, so there's no going to be revenue there. No agreement in place with, some of the UK channels to carry those. It seems like they're doing it half-arsed, for want of a better expression.
Well, it didn't work out the way they wanted it to. What they originally wanted to do was have a competition and have maybe two other providers in the marketplace providing the digital terrestrial television, and basically there was an auction of sorts, or basically a competition on to basically see who could do it. Three people went into it: Vox or DTT, One Vision, and Easy TV. And these guys would have brought in that kind of wealth of choice that we probably should have.
And we do have a lot of us. You see, that's the problem too, isn't it?
So that's it. And the thing is, at the moment, the only people who can go ahead with it is RTE. These guys all pulled out because of the recession, because they considered the economic circumstances weren't viable. The country is not going to have another competition for other providers until 2012, with a view to a provider being operational in 2013. So that effectively means that, even if you do fork out for this stuff and RTE provides it, you'll probably be stuck with the channels that they can provide, which would be your stuff you're mostly getting today, like TG3, RTE, BBC, all these different services. It's not until you other providers in the marketplace with, whatever they're providing, whether it's the History Channel or Discovery and all these different sports options and stuff like that, that's just not going to happen until there's new providers in the market. Tell us about SiliconeRepublic.com, an Irish website, is it? Yeah, we began in 2002. We started in the aftermath of the dot-com bust, if you remember that. I don't know if you do. But,
I was very young at the time, but I remember my father telling me about it.
But basically, we set up in the middle of that, and basically decided that there was a job to be done in terms of telling not only the story about technology in Ireland, but the story about the technology in the world. And, you know, if you really think about what's happened over the last 10 years from, it's only 12 years ago since Google was started, for example.
Astonishing. Or Facebook, even less.
YouTube was only bought by Google in 2005, having been started up in 2003.
Yeah.
And, like, you know, funny enough that we're talking about TV, but a lot more people are watching things like YouTube than simply turning on their TV sets anymore. Google has seen an 800% increase in Android phones sold throughout the world, which are these new smartphones, and they're like now nearly 20% of the world market for mobile phones. It's astonishing. We probably live in probably the most exciting time culturally since the invention of the printing press, and from the point of view, I think Ireland has a very valid role to play in that. I mean, we've got all the big companies who are here, like Google, Facebook, and Intel, Microsoft. They're all here. The thing is, our mission is also to see Irish companies grow and emerge and be just as relevant as any other Silicon Valley company. So I think we've got a lot of the right ingredients. I just think as a country we just need to believe in ourselves. Okay, caller asks, will you still have to pay for TV license? Well, regardless of how, if you have a telly, you have to pay for your license. That's it. It doesn't matter how you get the I think the question will be also going into the future, and it's been dismissed in the past, but it might not be dismissed in the future, is that, you know, you may have to, you can view TV now on your laptops and on your phones. Will you have to pay a TV license if you own one of these devices? So it's these are all questions that are going to be popping up over the next few years.
I mean, there's a real target on that now. I mean, you see a lot of these file sharing sites like Rapid Share, effectively, as people know it, being shut down. The music industry's tightening up on it, and a lot of the big show producers and film producers are also. So it's only a matter of time, really, is it, before we do have to pay a license, even if you only had your computer?
Well, you see, you're consuming content, and you know, if the country ever does seriously invest in say these next generation fibre networks to every home, for example, you know, they'll need to pay for it somehow. And you know, you could be asking, well, you have these internet connections, you do to get your content that way, so maybe you should pay for a TV license as well. But then you've got to say, well, how can you ask that of some kid who may be 12 or 13 walking around with a little netbook or an iPad? So it's a very confusing issue that will have to be resolved over the next couple of years.
This texter says, I'm picking up the new digital RTE with a rooftop aerial in Letterkenny. Sure, they haven't started transmitting, have they?
I don't think they have. I mean, certainly, for these DTT services, you need to have there's specific kind of DTT.
An MPEG-4 tuner, isn't it?
Sorry?
An MPEG-4 tuner in your TV too.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see that as physically possible.
Unless they're picking up the northern...
Unless they're retransmitting content that way, but really what digital allows you to do is basically get information such as like what's coming on the next, what shows...
Yeah, now and next, and yeah, exactly.
That kind of stuff. So.
All right, John, listen, thanks very much.
No problem at all.
Have a good day.
Bye.
Yeah. Number one in the Northwest, Highland Radio.